Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the pale light of an ancient Roman morning, the kind where the sun hasn't fully committed yet, and everything feels like it's stretching, yawning, and vaguely questioning its life choices. You stand at the edge of a tannery, yes, a real Roman tannery, where steam rises in soft ribbons, and the smell is, well, let's call it historically authentic. Tools clink, apprentices shuffle around half awake, and you step into the scene like someone who was absolutely not prepared for this 2,000-year-old sensory experience. At least you probably won't survive the smell. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, as always, drop your location and local time in the comments so I know where in the world you're wandering in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The shift from modern life to Roman workshop is so abrupt you practically hear your brain going, wait, we're doing what today? But you're already here, already stepping across uneven stone tiles, worn smooth by centuries of feet and spilled dye. The tannery pulses with soft activity, scraping, rinsing, muttering, and the occasional splash from someone discovering too late that the vat they're leaning over is deeper than expected. You adjust your footing, trying to look confident, but the floor is slick enough to remind you that Roman OSHA was not a thing. Warm morning light filters through slatted windows, striping the workshop floor in bands of gold and shadow. Dust and tiny tufts of loosened hair from hides float lazily in the air like confetti from a party. You definitely shouldn't attend barefoot. The scent hits you next. It's strong, earthy, tangy in a way that makes your eyebrows reconsider their loyalty to your face. A mainstream historical fact nudges your thoughts. Roman tanneries used a combination of urine, water, lime, and animal fats to treat hides, which explains, well, everything you're smelling right now. But beneath the sharpness, there's something strangely grounding, a reminder that before factories, before machines, before fast fashion, every sandal started here, in elbow-deep vats, in scraped hides, in the hands of people who worked with the land, the animals, and the seasons. You're not just watching this process, you're stepping into it. A young apprentice hurries past you, carrying a dripping hide over his shoulder. It flops like an unenthusiastic manta ray, and he shouts, "Careful," though it's not clear whether he means careful of him, careful of the hide, or careful because the floor is one bad decision away from sending you sliding across the workshop like an accidental gladiator entering the arena. You manage to sidestep just in time, giving him a look that translates roughly to, "Thanks for the warning, I guess." Off to your right, an older craftsman stirs a vat with a wooden pole longer than he is tall. Every time he turns the hide, he grumbles, which honestly seems fair. Another man sharpens knives on a stone slab with slow, rhythmic movements that echo through the room. He nods at you once, one of those nods that says, "Yes, I see you. No, I don't trust you with anything sharp." You wander deeper, feeling textures shift beneath your sandals. Gritty dust, smooth stone, a patch of something suspiciously squishy. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Some Roman workshops believed that placing a light sprig of mint above a doorway helped keep the hides cooperative. Whether that was psychosomatic or just wishful thinking, no one knows, but considering the smell, mint would be a heroic addition. You pause beside a wide table where partially processed hides are stacked in layers like flesh-toned pancakes. The top one gleams faintly, still moist from soaking. When you touch it, the surface feels cool and slightly rubbery. The apprentice beside you chuckles and says, "First time?" You nod. He pats your shoulder with the kind of sympathy usually reserved for someone who just announced they're doing their own taxes. As you continue through the bustling tannery, you begin to notice the rhythm of the place, the rise and fall of motion, the quiet concentration, the murmured conversations blending with the scrape of metal on hide. It isn't chaotic. It's more like a hive, each person knowing exactly where they fit, what they offer, what they're shaping. And for a moment, you feel like you've stepped not into a simple workshop, but into the early heartbeat of craftsmanship itself. Your senses adjust slowly. The smell doesn't vanish, but your brain decides to forgive it. The warmth becomes comfortable rather than stifling. The noise settles into a steady hum. One man expertly trims a hide with a curved blade, hands moving so fluidly it looks like the hide is cooperating willingly. "Been doing this since I was your age," he says without looking up. You're tempted to argue that you're not actually a Roman teen apprentice, but the humor probably won't translate. Historians still argue whether Roman tanneries were considered noble trades or necessary evils, skilled work, yet often set outside city centers due to odor. But watching these craftsmen, you see pride woven into every movement. They shape the materials that protect feet across an empire. Soldiers, farmers, merchants, they all rely on what begins right here. A splash from a nearby vat startles you. Another apprentice pulls a hide out of a bubbling mixture, water and chemicals cascading down his arms. "Still warm," he laughs, shaking droplets everywhere. You flinch, because nothing in this room should ever be described as warm, unless it's a sunbeam or a friendly hug. Yet there's a quiet beauty in the grit of this place, the authenticity, the grounded, unpolished reality of it. You breathe slowly, letting that realization settle into your chest. The work may be messy, smelly, and far from glamorous, but it's real. It's the beginning of something that will carry a person across distances, maybe even across history. A soft breeze drifts through the open doorway, stirring the smells, rustling the hanging tools, brushing cool air across your face. You step closer to the threshold, letting the light hit you fully. Your day in the workshop is only beginning. The hides behind you glisten, waiting. The tools gleam, sharpened, and the air hums with ancient purpose. You take a deeper breath, brave, maybe foolish, and step fully into your role. The world of Roman sandal-making has opened its doors to you, tugging you forward into craft, tradition, and the subtle art that begins not with beauty, but with raw, unrefined reality. You move farther into the tannery's inner courtyard, where the real transformation begins, not the poetic kind, but the kind involving vats big enough to drown a cow in. Not that anyone recommends that. Here, raw hides hang from wooden frames like oversized laundry, dripping steadily onto the packed earth below. You step closer, the morning chill brushing your skin as the rising steam creates a strange, shimmering haze around everything. It feels like walking into a place where the boundary between material and future sandal is deliberately blurry. A young apprentice waves you over with the enthusiasm of someone who either genuinely loves his job or hasn't yet realized he's allowed to quit. "You want to see how it starts?" he asks. Before you can say no, he's already placing a damp hide into your hands. It's heavier than you expect, dense, waterlogged, and squishier than anything should reasonably be at this hour of the morning. Your fingers sink slightly into the surface, and you understand why Roman craftsmen had forearms carved from pure determination. The apprentice gestures toward a long trough, filled with cloudy liquid. "Soak first," he says. You lower the hide carefully, submerging it into the mixture. It releases a slow bubble that rises to the surface and pops with a sad little sound, like the hide letting out one final complaint. A mainstream historical fact pops up in your mind. Romans used lime water to loosen hair and flesh from hides, making them easier to scrape. They also used urine, which you suddenly realize may explain why this particular trough smells like despair with a hint of regret. You stand there, watching the hide gently drift in the mixture, its edges curling like soggy pasta. Around you, other workers rhythmically stir their own troughs with long wooden paddles. The scraping station is nearby, and from here you can hear the steady shk-shk of metal against flesh, a sound that's surprisingly soothing once you stop thinking about what it actually is. Someone sneezes violently. Someone else swears in Latin with impressive fluency. A third person laughs at nothing in particular, probably the fumes getting to them. You pull the hide out when the apprentice gives the signal. It slaps against your hands with a weighty wobble. He guides you to the scraping beam, a slightly curved wooden post where hides are draped like towels. You lay the hide across the beam, gripping the two-handled scraper he hands you. It's shaped like a crescent moon with an attitude. "Push down," he says. You do. Nothing happens. He laughs, not unkindly, and adds, "Push down harder." You lean in, putting real force behind it. This time, something slides off the hide with a wet, unpleasant squelch that makes you rethink every life choice that led you here. But as more material peels away, you start to see the clean leather beneath lighter, smoother, almost luminous compared to the raw layers you scraped off. The transformation is oddly satisfying, like peeling dried glue off your hand in school, except significantly more historical and significantly less hygienic. The apprentice nods approvingly. Again. You scrape, then scrape again, and again. Muscles you didn't know you had begin staging a protest, and you notice the craftsman watching you with amused expressions. One of them mutters something about new hands, always shaking by midday. You don't appreciate the prophecy, but you can't deny it feels accurate. Nearby, a more experienced craftsman demonstrates the next stage, fleshing. He works with startling efficiency, removing the inner layer of tissue. His blade glides in confident arcs, and strips of unwanted material fall away like ribbons. He glances at you and shrugs. Practice, he says, and stubbornness. He taps the hide with the tip of his blade. Leather respects stubbornness. You make a mental note to be more stubborn. A fringe tidbit floats into your thoughts. Some ancient writers mentioned that tanners were believed to have unusually strong hands because of constant scraping and soaking. One satirist even joked that shaking hands with a tanner felt like gripping a sandal sole instead of a man. Comforting? No. But vividly descriptive? Absolutely. You return to your own hide, working slowly, feeling the texture change under your fingers as the surface becomes cleaner, smoother. Once you finish, the apprentice lifts the hide and holds it toward the light. He nods. Good, he says. Not great, but good. Somehow this feels like the highest praise you could hope for from someone who's probably 14 and knows more about leather than most modern adults know about their own taxes. He leads you to another vat, this one filled with tannins from oak bark, gallnuts, and other plant materials. The smell is sharp but earthy, like a forest trying its best to apologize for the previous vat's existence. You stir the mixture with a long paddle, watching the liquid swirl around the hide as it begins its slow transformation into durable leather. This process can take days or weeks depending on thickness, but here, in your little pocket of narrative time, the moments bend into each other with the softness of a story that knows you need to keep moving. Historians still argue whether Romans preferred vegetable tanning or mineral tanning for sandal straps. Evidence leans both ways depending on region and period. But the craftsman next to you insists vegetable tanning is the only way to honor the hide, pounding his chest dramatically, like a man whose life depends on winning this argument. As the hides hang to dry, you walk between them, the rows stretching like a curtain maze. The light filters through the semi-translucent surfaces, glowing golden and warm, transforming the workshop into something unexpectedly beautiful. You reach out, letting your fingers hover just above a nearly finished piece of leather. It's firm yet flexible, the perfect material for straps, soles, and every detail a sandal needs to survive Roman roads, weather, and human stubbornness. An older woman tanner, the kind who could probably intimidate a senator with one stern glance, stops beside you. She holds up a finished sheet of supple, amber-toned leather and says, "This is the beginning. Everyone thinks the beauty comes later. But here," she taps the hide, "this is where the sandal is born." You nod, understanding more than she realizes. Craft isn't just what people see, it's everything you do before that moment. Your arms ache, your hands smell like history. A thin mist of tannery vapor clings to your hair like a ghost of hard work. And somehow, through all of that, you feel steady, grounded, like you've stepped into a world where effort becomes art piece by piece, scrape by scrape, soak by soak. You stand in the courtyard, watching the drying hides sway gently like flags of a forgotten army, and you realize something simple but important. You're no longer a visitor in this workshop, you're becoming part of it. You move from the tannery courtyard into the adjoining workshop, where the air shifts from sharp tannin-scented mist to the warmer, dustier smell of wood shavings and oiled tools. This is where the real sculpting begins, not with marble or bronze, but with leather, which, in its own stubborn way, demands just as much precision and respect. The floorboards creak gently under your sandals as you cross the threshold, and sunlight spills through high windows, catching floating specks of dust that drift like lazy sparks in the air. A craftsman waves you over, and before you can prepare yourself, you're swallowed into the bustling heart of pattern making. On a long table lies a stack of freshly tanned hides, smooth, warm-toned, and still carrying a faint echo of the courtyard's scents. They've been cleaned, softened, and stretched taut, waiting for someone to cut the shapes that will become soles, straps, loops, and fastenings. Waiting for you, apparently, because the craftsman smiles in a way that suggests he's very willing to make this your problem. He hands you a stylus, thin, sharp, metal-tipped. "Trace," he says simply. You nod, trying to appear confident, even though your hands still remember the weight of the hides you scraped earlier. He unrolls a parchment containing a sandal pattern, outlines of straps, curves of soles, tiny notes, scribbled in Latin shorthand, that may or may not be insulting. You place the stylus to the leather surface and begin tracing. At first, your lines wobble as though your fingers are still deciding which century they belong to, but gradually, the movement steadies. The stylus glides along the grain, dipping slightly where the leather softens. It's almost meditative until a blade clatters loudly somewhere behind you, and you jump hard enough to draw an accidental squiggle in the middle of your pattern. The craftsman raises an eyebrow. You mutter something about artistic interpretation. He does not smile. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Roman sandal patterns varied widely, depending on region and class. Soldiers' caligae, citizens' sandals, women's ornate designs, children's simple pairs. Leather workers often kept small libraries of wooden templates or parchment layouts, handed down through generations like family recipes, which means the parchment in your hands could very well be older than some modern countries. No pressure. You try again, this time focusing on the evenness of your curve, the flow of the outline. Across the room, blades against sharpening stones in slow, consistent arcs. The sound blends with murmured conversation, with the soft thump of someone testing a half-finished sole against the ground, with the papery rustle of leather being stacked and sorted. It's a warm, living symphony, one that doesn't pause for you, but makes room for you if you learn its rhythm. You finish tracing your first sole, then move to the straps, long, thin shapes that snake across the hide like lines on an ancient map. The craftsman demonstrates how each strap must be aligned along the leather's strongest direction, never across the weak grain, he warns, unless you like explaining to a very angry customer why his sandal snapped while crossing the forum. A fringe tidbit slips into your mind. Some Romans believed that sandals with poorly aligned straps brought bad luck on journeys. Traveling merchants might refuse to buy footwear if the cuts looked careless, claiming it angered Mercury, the god of roads. Whether that was superstition or an early form of quality control, no one's entirely sure. But the craftsman beside you mutters, "Superstitious fools," under his breath. So clearly the debate persists across centuries. You finish tracing the necessary shapes and step back, admiring your work. The lines are smoother now, more deliberate. Nothing Picasso-esque this time. The craftsman nods and hands you a cutting knife, small, sharp, crescent-shaped. You hold it carefully, suddenly aware of how many fingers you would prefer to keep. He demonstrates first, slicing a sole shape free with steady, confident pressure. The knife glides beautifully, like it was designed for this one task, and takes offense at being used for anything else. Then he hands the knife back to you. "Your turn," he says. You take a breath, anchor the leather with one hand, and begin cutting along the outline you traced. At first, you move too cautiously, creating little stutters in the line. The craftsman clears his throat pointedly, not impatient, just guiding. You adjust your grip, angle the blade, and push forward with smoother force. This time, the knife follows the curve cleanly, freeing the shape in a single continuous motion. It's satisfying, deeply, almost suspiciously satisfying, like peeling the plastic off a new phone, but with more risk to your limbs. You move to the straps, cutting long, thin lengths that curl slightly as they're freed from the hide. Across the room, other workers trim, test, measure, curse mildly, and joke with one another. One man holds up a scrap of leather shaped vaguely like a lopsided fish, announcing it's an experimental sandal for mermaids. A few apprentices groan. One genuinely considers it. You suppress a laugh. Historians still argue whether Roman sandal makers worked individually or in specialized teams. Evidence suggests both existed. Some shops handled every step from tanning to stitching, while others divided tasks between leatherworkers, metal workers, and cobblers. In this workshop, though, you can feel the collective rhythm, each person contributing to a shared craft, like a chorus where every voice matters. As you finish the last strap, the craftsman picks up one of your cut pieces, folds it between his fingers, and examines the edge. Clean, he says. Then he adds, surprising. You're not sure if that's encouragement or confusion. You'll take it either way. He directs you to gather your pieces: soles, straps, loops, and fastenings. You place them together on the table, realizing that this small pile of shapes, curved, angled, purposeful, is the foundation of a sandal that someone will someday walk miles in, up hills, through markets, across borders, maybe through history itself. You run your fingers over the freshly cut leather. It's soft at the edges, firm in the center, warm from your touch. For the first time, the process feels real. This isn't abstract anymore. You're not learning about sandal making. You're making one piece by piece, decision by decision, mistake by mistake. The craftsman gathers up the scraps and tosses them into a woven basket for reuse. Nothing is wasted here. Every piece has value. Every cut matters. You look down at the shapes you created, seeing not just outlines but potential, the beginnings of structure, the early bones of a sandal that will soon hold weight, balance, and purpose. The workshop hums around you. Tools clink, leather rustles, blades whisper along stone. You take a breath, feeling the rhythm settle into your chest, and you realize the next step is waiting, not in the abstract, in your hands. You carry your freshly cut pieces across the workshop toward a long, low bench where sandal soles are built from the ground up, literally. The atmosphere changes as you approach. Fewer jokes, fewer wandering apprentices, fewer distractions. This part of the craft is quieter, heavier, more deliberate. Soles are the foundation of everything, the part people forget about until they trip on a stone and suddenly remember how important structural integrity really is. You take your seat at the bench, laying out your pieces carefully, and the craftsman beside you grunts in a way that roughly translates to, "Don't mess this up." The bench is scattered with sheets of thicker leather, stiffer, darker, treated to withstand the kind of abuse Roman roads were famously enthusiastic about. You pick one up, feeling its weight in your hands. It's dense, strong, smelling faintly of oil and earth. This piece of leather has a story already. Even before you turn it into a sole, you run your thumb along its surface, tracing the subtle ridges of its grain. The craftsman taps the table. "Layering," he says. He places one sheet down, and then another, aligning them with practiced precision. "Soles need strength," he continues, "but not too much weight. Find the balance." He presses the layers together and hands you a small clay pot filled with adhesive that looks suspiciously like it was discovered at the bottom of a swamp. You dip your fingers carefully, because this stuff looks like it will bond you to the table permanently, and spread a thin layer across the leather. A mainstream historical fact pops into your thoughts. Romans used animal-based glues, derived from hides, bones, and connective tissue, boiled down into a thick jelly. Effective? Yes. Pleasant? Absolutely not. You spread the adhesive as thinly as the craftsman showed you, because too much glue will seep, crack, and ruin the flexibility. Too little, and the layers will peel apart the moment someone takes a brisk walk to complain about taxes. You press your first two layers together. The craftsman nods approvingly, then gestures for you to add a third. "For city sandals," he says. "2 or 3. For soldiers? More." He shrugs with sympathy. Roman roads love chewing on soles. You build your layers slowly, carefully pressing the edges, aligning every curve with the pattern you cut earlier. The layers adhere with a faint tackiness, firm enough to stay together, soft enough to adjust. It feels like building something alive, piece by piece. coaxing shape and strength into existence. Next comes shaping. You place your layered piece onto a wooden last, a foot-shaped mold, smooth from years of use. The craftsman demonstrates how to press the edges down, bending the leather so it will eventually cradle the foot. You follow his motions, thumbs digging into the material, palms pushing downward with firm, even pressure. Your hands start to ache almost immediately. Roman sandal-making apparently believes deeply in character building through muscle fatigue. Across the workshop, you hear someone drop a tool and curse so loudly the gods probably take notice. Another worker responds with an even louder curse, and then they both laugh like this is just the natural language of craftsmanship, which, honestly, it might be. You continue shaping the soul, working slowly, coaxing curves and smoothing edges. The craftsman places your piece on the stone floor and tells you to stand on it. You blink, but he gestures more firmly. Feel it, so you do. You step on the unfinished sole, feeling the leather shift slightly under your weight, adjusting, warming. It's rough, imperfect, uneven but undeniably becoming something real. He nods, satisfied. A sole must meet the foot, he says, not the other way around. A fringe tidbit whispers into your memory. Some Romans believed that soles imprinted with a person's footprint held traces of their identity, which is why certain amulets were designed in foot shapes, not necessarily related to your task, but a curious reminder that even ancient footwear carried symbolism beyond function. You return to the bench and begin trimming the edges. The knife slices through the layered leather with a satisfying resistance, like cutting through something that's trying to decide if it should let you. Each curve must follow the pattern precisely too wide, and the sandal flops. Too narrow, and someone loses a toe. You focus, steadying your breathing, guiding the blade with the confidence you're aggressively pretending to have. The craftsman inspects your progress. He grunts again. This grunt feels different. Less, don't ruin my tools. More, not terrible. You'll take it. Then comes the part no one warned you about. Testing. The craftsman drops your half-shaped sole onto the floor and kicks it lightly. It skitters across the stone like a startled beetle. Sturdy, he mutters, examining how it lands. Then he hands it to you. Your turn. You give it a gentle tap with your foot. No, he says. Kick it. So you do. It slides a respectable distance, spins once, and smacks into a wooden post with a faint thwack. The craftsman nods. If it survives that, it survives a short walk. You can't tell if this is science or tradition, but everyone else in the workshop seems unfazed. One man even kicks his so hard it ricochets off a crate and nearly takes out an apprentice. The apprentice ducks with the reflexes of someone who's been through this exact situation before. Historians still argue whether Roman sandal soles were reinforced with hobnails for everyday wear or reserved mainly for military use. Some archaeological finds show civilian sandals with small metal points. Others don't. But as you test your piece against the stone floor, you understand why metal studs became so important. Roads here aren't gentle. They're stubborn, uneven, more interested in survival than elegance. With the edges trimmed and the shape set, the craftsman shows you how to score the underside of the sole, creating small cross-hatched grooves. Grip, he explains. Wet stone, mud, tavern floors. You nod solemnly at the last one, clearly a dangerous terrain in any era. You score the sole carefully, the blade biting just enough to create texture without weakening the structure. Thin curls of leather fall to the floor like shavings of cinnamon, except tragically non-edible. When you finish, the craftsman places your sole next to a row of completed ones, thick, sturdy, shaped with the intention of carrying someone across their life. You see yours among them. And despite the imperfections, despite the uneven edges, only you may notice, something warm settles in your chest. You made this. You built something that will hold weight, bear miles, endure weather, and support a stranger's footsteps. The workshop hums steadily around you, tools tapping, leather creaking, craftsmen laughing, someone yelling about missing awls. The air smells like oil, glue, and the deep earthiness of leather warming in sunlight. And as you stand there, looking at the sole you shaped with your own hands, You feel connected not just to the workshop, but to the centuries of makers who stood exactly where you're standing, cutting, shaping, building the very thing that carried Rome across its world. Your hands ache, your shoulders protest, your heart feels strangely full, and the next step, attaching the straps, waits patiently for you. You return to your workbench carrying the finished sole, feeling its comforting weight in your hands. It's sturdy now, confident, almost as if it already knows it's about to become something greater. The workshop around you hums with steady purpose, but here in the strap-making corner, the air feels different, tighter, more focused, because straps aren't just decoration, they're architecture, they're geometry, they're the difference between comfortable sandal and why does my foot feel like it's being attacked by angry spaghetti. Your pile of leather strips waits for you long, flexible, smelling faintly of oil and the tannery courtyard. You pick one up, running your fingers along its length. It's warm, smooth at the edges, firm in the center. The grain feels alive. You can already imagine how it will move once it's attached, bending, flexing, hugging the foot with every step. The craftsman steps beside you and taps the sole. Symmetry, he says, pointing to its center. Then he taps your forehead, and patience. You nod solemnly. You have no idea if you actually possess patience, but you're willing to pretend until it manifests. He shows you how to measure placement points, where the strap will loop through, where it must anchor under the sole, where it crosses the top of the foot without slicing circulation in half. He marks tiny dots with the tip of his awl. Every foot, he murmurs, has a story. Straps must respect it. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your mind. Roman sandals varied incredibly in their strap designs. Some had simple loops, others complex lattices, and wealthier citizens often requested intricate patterns meant to display status. A well-designed strap wasn't just functional, it signaled identity. You're suddenly aware that what you're creating isn't just footwear, it's communication. You lift your first strap and position it against the sole. The craftsman nods, then motions for you to follow the curve of the foot. You slide the strap across the top, pulling it snug, not too loose, not too tight. The balance is delicate, like tuning an instrument that may bite you if you're careless. He hands you an awl. Make the hole. You take a breath, press the awl point into the leather, and twist. The leather resists at first, then yields cleanly, crisply. The satisfaction is immediate. The craftsman gives a noise of approval that sounds vaguely like a turtle clearing its throat. You thread the strap through the hole, pulling it until it sits just right, and suddenly, the sandal begins transforming before your eyes. No longer a flat piece of leather, but something with bones, with direction, with intention. But now comes the real challenge: achieving symmetry. Across the workshop, another apprentice is apparently losing a battle with his own strap arrangement. His sandal looks like it's attempting interpretive dance. You silently vow not to let that be your fate. You align your second strap, checking angles, lengths, and tension. The craftsman watches quietly, too quietly. You place the strap. He frowns. You adjust it. He still frowns. You adjust again. He shrugs. This might be his version of enthusiastic praise. A fringe tidbit drifts into your mind. Some Roman sandal makers believed that mismatched straps invited misfortune, especially on long journeys. One writer joked that travelers who ignored strap symmetry tempted Mercury's irritation, which, frankly, is a very poetic way of saying, trip and fall on your face. You work slower now, letting the rhythm settle into your fingers. Measure, mark, pierce, thread. Measure, mark, pierce, thread. Each movement becomes smoother, more confident, more connected to the leather's quiet logic. You start noticing the natural flexibility of each strip, how some bend more willingly, how others prefer to stay firm, how each strap has a subtle personality of its own. Once the main cross straps are set, you add the side loops, thin strips that will hold the longer lace in place. You press them flat, secure them with tiny slits, and tuck the ends neatly beneath the sole, where the stitching will anchor them permanently. It feels like working on a puzzle, one where every piece must be perfect, or the entire structure collapses like a badly designed soup bowl. The craftsman hands you a longer strap, this one for the ankle. Wrap it, he says. You wrap the strap around your hand, then around the wooden last, imagining how it will embrace a living ankle. It curves beautifully, nestling into the shape with surprising grace. You smile despite yourself. The craftsman sees it and mutters, "Don't fall in love with it." You consider telling him it's too late. Symmetry now means planning the path of the strap around both sides of the foot. You adjust angles until they mirror each other, two elegant lines, framing the foot. When you're satisfied, you secure them with another pair of awl holes, each one satisfying to make, each one a quiet punctuation mark in the story of this sandal. Historians still argue whether Roman sandals were standardized or custom-fitted. Archaeological evidence reveals both mass-produced designs and highly tailored ones. Watching your creation take shape, you feel the truth of that debate. Some sandals were crafted for anyone who needed them. Others were crafted for the feet that would wear them like a second skin. You tighten the straps once more, smoothing them down, aligning every angle. Something delicate settles over the moment, a sense of balance, of harmony, of the leather agreeing to your plan. The sandal looks right now. More than right. It looks intentional. As you lift it up, turning it in your hands, the workshop light catches the smooth leather cross straps, the clean pierced edges, the gentle curves you coaxed into existence. It's beautiful in its simplicity. It's honest. It's exactly what a Roman sandal should be. You place it beside the unfinished sole for its pair, and for a moment, you just stand there, feeling the quiet triumph settle in your chest. You didn't just attach straps. You shaped how a foot will move, how a traveler will walk, how someone will journey across their entire day. The sandal isn't finished yet, but it's alive now, and the stitching that comes next will bind everything together. You carry your half-formed sandal to the stitching bench, a long wooden table carved with so many needle marks. It looks like a battlefield, fought entirely by tiny, sharp warriors. The air here feels different, quieter, steadier, as if even the workshop itself knows this step requires a gentler kind of focus. Stitching is where sandals earn their longevity. Anyone can cut straps, anyone can shape a sole. But stitching decides whether a sandal becomes a trusted companion or an awkward leather pancake, waiting to fall apart at the first pothole. A craftsman places an awl in your hand, slender, polished, wickedly pointed. It gleams with the kind of confidence only an object used for generations can possess. "Do not bleed on the leather," he warns, almost casually. You nod with the seriousness of someone who fully intends to keep all their internal fluids internal. He picks up a sole and positions it under a loop of straps. "Every stitch," he says, pulls the sandal together. Then he threads a bone needle with waxed linen cord and demonstrates the motion. Push the awl, make the hole, slide the needle through, pull tight. His hands move like water, smooth, precise, unhurried. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Then he hands the workpiece to you. Your first attempt is cautious, very cautious. You press the awl into the leather and immediately realize it's tougher than you expected. It doesn't slice through, it pushes back, refusing to yield until you angle your wrist correctly and apply steady pressure. Finally, the awl punctures the sole, making a clean, tight hole. You thread the needle through. It slips in neatly, then catches, then gives way as you pull the cord snug. The stitch holds. You exhale slowly. One down. Only several thousand to go. A mainstream historical fact rises in your thoughts. Roman sandals often used a saddle stitch technique, where each hole received two threads crossing in opposite directions, creating reinforced seams that survived years of walking on stone roads. Some archaeological finds still have intact stitching after 2 millennia, proof that this wasn't casual craft. This was engineering. You continue, finding a rhythm. Awl, needle, pull, awl, needle, pull. Each motion creates a tiny heartbeat within the leather, pulling strap and sole tighter together, binding them into something stronger than either piece alone. You lose yourself in the repetition, in the soft crunch of leather parting beneath the awl, in the faint squeak of cord tightening, in the warm weight of the sandal gradually settling into your hands. The apprentice at the next bench curses loudly as his needle snaps. He stares at the broken tip like it personally betrayed him. Another worker tosses him a replacement without looking up, muttering, "Again, again." Clearly, this is a recurring theme. You smile inwardly. Nice to know chaos is historically universal. You shift to the inner edges of the sandal, where straps must be secured from underneath. The craftsman shows you how to fold spare ends beneath the layers of the sole, piercing clean holes to anchor them. It's fiddly work, and you jab your thumb once, just once. But true to your vow, no blood touches the sandal. Your dignity, however, is mildly wounded. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Some ancient sandal makers believed that knots hidden inside the sole trapped good fortune, so long as they were tied with intention. Others thought knots prevented evil spirits from slipping between the layers and tugging at the wearer's steps. Historians find these claims unlikely but charming, which honestly could describe most ancient footwear legends. You finish the bottom stitching and flip the sandal over. The surface is smoother now, the straps lying flush against the sole, each stitch pulling them tight like tiny, determined hands clasping together. You run your fingers along the underside, feeling the uniform bumps where the cord creates its subtle pattern. It's sturdy, it's neat, it's real craftsmanship. Of course, refinement comes next. The craftsman hands you a pumice stone, rough, pale, dust clinging to its edges. "Smooth the sides," he says. You hold the sandal at an angle and begin rubbing the sole's edge in small, steady circles. Tiny flecks of leather fall away, raining down like dusty snow. The edge softens, rounds, evens. Bit by bit, the sandal transforms from a collection of components into something unified, something whole. Across the table, another worker demonstrates a technique for tightening final stitches. He loops the cord around a small horn tool and pulls sharply. The stitch cinches tighter with a satisfying snap. You repeat the motion on your own sandal. It snaps sharply, so sharply, in fact, that the apprentice beside you jumps and drops his awl. You pretend not to notice. Historians still argue whether Roman sandals were stitched entirely by hand, or if simple forms of stitching frames existed in certain workshops. But watching these craftsmen work, each person's hands, moving with instinctive precision, you suspect handwork predominated. Machines might produce consistency, but the human touch produces loyalty. These sandals were meant to last because someone cared enough to stitch every line with purpose. You hold the sandal up to the light. The straps curve gracefully over the sole. The seams hug the edges with quiet confidence. The shape is unmistakably Roman practical, elegant in its simplicity, designed to endure dust, stone, mud, heat, and whatever questionable substances lurked on ancient roads at night. The craftsman takes it from you, tests the strength of the straps, pulls at the seams, bends the sole slightly. His eyebrows rise only a little, but enough to spark a small flare of pride in your chest. "Good," he murmurs. "Strong. You weren't expecting praise, but here it is, shaped in the language of understatement. In this workshop, good means something. It means you've earned the next step." He hands the sandal back and gestures toward a row of nearly finished pairs hanging on pegs. "Put it there. Let it rest." You hang the sandal among its siblings, watching the light fall across its curves. It looks at home there, like it's always belonged in the workshop, like it's ready to walk out into a Roman day without hesitation. Your fingers ache, your shoulders burn, but your heart feels steady. Stitch by stitch, you've pulled yourself deeper into the craft, and the leather, warm beneath your touch, has accepted you. The next stage, adding metal fittings, waits with a faint glimmer of bronze. You leave the stitching bench with fingers still tingling from tension and repeated pressure, but before you can shake them out properly, the metallic clink of tools draws your attention to the far side of the workshop. This is the metalworking corner, where sandals gain their little flashes of personality, durability, and flair. Bronze buckles, iron studs, decorative rings, tiny clasps, the jewelry of the Roman foot. The air hums differently here, resonant with the tap-tap-tap of metal against anvil and the soft rasp of files smoothing edges to perfection. A craftsman motions for you to approach. His apron is heavier than the others, darkened by soot and oil, and his hands gleam with flecks of bronze dust that sparkle when they catch the light. He holds up a tiny buckle no more than a thumb's width across and says, "These make the difference." Then he places it in your palm, where it rests with surprising weight. For something so small, it feels like it carries responsibility. You turn it over between your fingers. It's simple but elegant. A loop, a pin, a tiny bar for anchoring. Functional, yes, but undeniably beautiful in its craftsmanship. Fashion, you ask. The craftsman snorts. Survival first, fashion second. Then, quieter, but a little shine never hurt anyone. A mainstream historical fact rises naturally in your thoughts. Roman footwear often incorporated metal fittings for both utility and style. Legionary sandals Caligae used iron hobnails to grip roads and protect soles from wear, while wealthier citizens adorned their sandals with bronze buckles, decorative studs, and even silver embellishments. Status could be read right off someone's feet. Not subtle, but very Roman. The craftsman leads you to a tray filled with an assortment of fittings. Some are small and utilitarian, others sparkle with carefully hammered designs. One buckle is shaped like a stylized dolphin, another bears a faint geometric pattern, a third, well, it looks like someone tried to make a lion but accidentally invented a startled house cat. You set that one aside gently, out of respect. He hands you a small hammer, lighter than expected, but finely balanced. "You will attach the buckle," he says, pointing to your sandal hanging nearby, "and maybe one or two studs. Not too many." He narrows his eyes. "We're not decorating a senator." You retrieve your sandal and bring it to the metalworking bench. The craftsman shows you how to gently punch a slit in the strap, using a narrow chisel, guiding it with careful taps of the hammer. The sound rings pleasantly, a clean ping that echoes across the room. You insert the metal bar of the buckle through the slit and fold the leather around it, anchoring it with a thin bronze rivet. As you hammer the rivet into place, you try not to flinch with each strike. The metal flattens neatly, securing the buckle with a satisfying finality. You check the movement. The pin lifts cleanly. The loop glides smoothly. It feels right. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Some Romans believed that metal on sandals warded off mischievous household spirits, who supposedly detested the ringing sound of bronze. Was this true? Debatable. Did sandal makers sometimes jingle their tools dramatically to cleanse the workshop? Extremely likely. In fact, the apprentice across the bench shakes a handful of loose buckles at another apprentice, already looking stressed. The result is a yelp, a dropped strap, and a proud older craftsman nodding like this was an educational triumph. You move on to decorative studs, small round bronze pieces no bigger than pepper seeds. They sit along the strap, not too many, just enough to give personality. The craftsman shows you how to punch the smallest possible hole, insert the stud, and pinch the back closed with a pair of pliers. You repeat the process with careful precision, hearing tiny clicks as each metal point locks into place. The sandal suddenly transforms under your hands. The studs catch the sunlight, creating faint glints like stars scattered across warm leather. It's subtle but unmistakable, a flash of craftsmanship, a whisper of style, a statement that someone cared enough to make this sandal more than functional. And now comes the test. The craftsman gestures toward a stone slab on the floor. "Strike it," he says. You blink. "Strike it with..." "What?" He points at the sandal. "Ah." You tap the sole lightly. He shakes his head. You tap harder. "No." You sigh and smack the sandal firmly against the slab. There's a sharp metallic ring as the studs and buckle vibrate. The craftsman listens intently, head tilted like he's judging the tone of a particularly anxious bell. He nods. Good metal. Good placement. Historians still argue whether Roman workshops tuned metal fittings by sound, but you're starting to believe it. The craftsman looks deeply pleased with that ringing note. Next, he shows you how to check the durability of the buckle pin. You loop the strap through, fasten it, tug. It holds. You tug harder. It still holds. You tug so hard you worry you might tear a muscle, and the craftsman finally chuckles. "The sandal survives," he says. "Your arm, perhaps not." Around you, Other craftsmen adorn sandals of every type. Soldiers' caligae with rows of hobnails being hammered into their soles. Merchant sandals with reinforced buckles. Women's walking sandals with delicate spirals of metal shaped like leaves. Each person works with intensity, pride, and a touch of artistic mischief. One apprentice shows off a sandal he's decorated with an admittedly adorable bronze fish charm. The room reacts with immediate judgment. Is he walking or swimming? Someone asks. Another chimes in. Only if he slips. Even the stern master smirks. The apprentice sighs and removes the fish, mumbling about no appreciation for innovation. You finish your metalwork, turning the sandal in your hands. It gleams softly now, the bronze buckles shining against the warm leather straps. The studs glint with quiet dignity. Nothing flashy, nothing excessive, just enough to say, someone crafted this with intention. The craftsman takes the sandal, weighs it in his palm, examines every metal piece, and finally hands it back with a single nod. Small, almost invisible, but powerful. Approval. You run your thumb along the buckle, feeling the slight warmth of the metal. You picture someone fastening it on their foot, pulling the strap snug, stepping into their day with confidence. Metal and leather, style and function, history and craft. It all meets here, in the quiet hum of a Roman workshop. And now, with the sandal taking shape beautifully, it's time to face a different challenge. Constructing the version meant not for civilians, but for soldiers. You don't even have time to admire your newly adorned civilian sandal before a deep voice from across the workshop calls your name, or rather, a version of your name that sounds like it's been run through gravel and discipline. You turn to see a broad-shouldered craftsman beckoning you over, with 2 fingers thick enough to qualify as separate species. The other workers give him a respectful berth. Even the apprentices suddenly remember tasks they absolutely must complete on the opposite side of the room. This, you realize, must be the caligae master, the specialist who builds the sandals worn by Rome's legionaries. And if your current sandals were lessons in balance and elegance, caligae are something else entirely. These boots are not subtle. They are not ornamental. They're weapons for your feet. He gestures to a heavy, unfinished pair already taking shape on his bench. Thick soles, wide openings, dozens of punched holes waiting for laces. This is footwear meant to march across continents, stomp through mud, climb stone fortresses, and if necessary, kick someone with convincing authority. You, he says, without preamble, will make one. You swallow. One. Caliga. He nods. Yes, for a legionary. Strong one. Big feet. Bad attitude. You glance around nervously. Is he here? The craftsman snorts. He's everywhere. You decide not to ask. He places a slab of thick leather in front of you, thicker than anything you've worked with so far, practically a hide with ambitions. You push your fingers into it and feel resistance, the kind that informs you this leather will not simply cooperate. You'll have to negotiate, possibly bribe it. A mainstream historical fact rises in your mind. Roman caligae were famous for their durability. Soldiers often walked 20, 30 kilometers a day, so their footwear had to be breathable, flexible, and strong enough to withstand months, sometimes years of brutal terrain. Archaeological remains show deeply worn soles and dozens of hobnails driven into each one, forming aggressive, almost armored patterns. The footwear of an empire on the move. The craftsman slaps a wooden template onto the leather and hands you a heavy knife. Cut, he orders. You cut, or rather, you attempt to cut, because the leather pushes back with all the stubbornness of a mule that has seen too much. You press harder, leaning into it. Finally, the knife bites, slicing through with a satisfying thunk. The craftsman nods once, as though evaluating your potential for survival. This, he says, tapping the thick shape you just freed, is only the beginning. He hands you a second layer, then a third. Caliga soles are thick, he explains. The world is not gentle to soldiers. You glue and stack the layers, just as before, but this time, everything is heavier, denser. Your arms tremble slightly from the effort. Even lifting the sole to inspect it feels like preparing to deliver a speech to the Senate. Then comes the part you've been dreading. The hobnails. The caliga master slides a tray toward you, It's filled with small, sharp metal nails, shaped like pyramids, the hobnails that will stud the bottom of the soldier's sandal. They glint like tiny, smug teeth. "You will hammer these," he says. You nod and reach for one. No! He grabs something else. A strip of parchment covered in circles and lines a pattern. In rows. In order. Not randomly like chickens running. You hadn't realized chickens were such heinous designers. But the craftsman seems personally offended by them. You place the first hobnail on the sole, aligning it with the pattern. Then you take the hammer and tap lightly. Nothing happens. The hobnail stares at you. You strike harder. It sinks halfway. The Kaliga master grunts. Harder. They must never fall out. Even when soldier is running. Even when soldier is drunk. Even when soldier is drunk and running. That seems like a lot of pressure for one hobnail. But you comply. You strike again, firm, confident, and the nail drives deep, seating perfectly. The craftsman gives the tiniest approving grunt, which, based on his personality, probably translates to, "Magnificent work, apprentice of my heart." You continue hammering hobnails, one by one, falling into a rhythm, tap to set, strike to secure. The metal clinks, the leather thuds, and slowly, the sole transforms into a studded battlefield. Rows of hobnails create patterns, almost ceremonial circles, lines, reinforcement points at the heel and forefoot. You realize you're building not just a shoe, but a survival tool. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Some legionaries arranged their hobnails to leave distinctive prints in the dirt, signaling their cohort or legion. Others insisted patterns made them luckier in battle, though which pattern was lucky depended on who survived to claim it. You glance down at your pattern, hoping you're not accidentally inventing a design known historically as the unlucky left foot. When the sole is complete, the craftsman flips it over and knocks it against the stone floor. The sound echoes like a shield being struck. A good sign. Next come the upper straps, long, thick strips that weave up and around the foot and ankle. Unlike civilian sandals, caligae are open but structured, wrapping the foot in a lattice meant for stability. You punch rows of holes along each strap, ensuring even spacing. The craftsman watches closely. "Symmetry," he mutters. Soldiers notice, then complain. You thread the long lace through the holes, weaving it in a crisscross pattern. The result looks rugged, assertive, unquestionably martial. You imagine the legionary who'll wear it marching, training, shouting, probably inventing new swear words on the battlefield. The caligae you're making must withstand all of that. Historians still argue whether caligae caused or prevented injuries during long marches, but archaeological evidence suggests legionaries trusted them. Some even repaired their footwear meticulously, rather than accept new pairs. Footwear wasn't just an accessory, it was a partner in survival. The craftsman hands your finished caliga back to you. It's heavier than the civilian sandal, colder from the metal, fiercer in its design. When you hold it up to the light, the hobnails glitter like stars, aggressive, purposeful stars that would definitely win a bar fight. He inspects your work carefully, very carefully, painfully carefully. Then he nods and says, "A soldier could walk in this." You're not sure if that's praise or the highest praise ever recorded in this workshop, but your chest warms all the same. You hang the caliga next to the other pairs, each one a testament to distance traveled, battles fought, histories shaped by footsteps. And as you exhale, you realize something unexpected. Making footwear for soldiers feels different, heavier, yes, but also noble. You're crafting something meant to endure, to protect, to accompany a person through the hardest parts of their journey. The caliga smells like leather and iron, but it feels like duty. And now, with the soldier's sandal complete, the workshop shifts again, its mood softening, as you move toward the creation of something entirely different. The elegant, expressive sandals worn by Rome's civilians. You leave the weighty clank of the caligae bench behind, and the workshop seems to exhale as you step into the civilian sandal corner, lighter, quieter, almost stylish. The air carries a different scent here, softer and warmer, a blend of oiled leather, dried herbs, and something faintly floral. This is where sandals become more than tools. This is where they become statements. The head craftsman of this corner, a sharp-eyed woman, with the posture of someone who has never once tolerated nonsense, looks you over, then gestures for you to approach. Her benches are neatly arranged, thin leather sheets in various hues, delicate strap templates, tiny pots of pigments, baskets of decorative trims. Compared to the Kaliga bench, it feels like stepping out of a forge and into a boutique. "You've made soldier sandals," she says. "Now you make sandals for people who complain if their feet are unhappy." She narrows her eyes. "Or if their neighbor's feet look better." You swallow. No pressure at all. She brings out a sleek sandal sole, thinner than the Kaliga one, gently curved, exquisitely smooth. You run your fingers along it. The surface feels like a calm lake at dusk, glossy, cool, reflecting a softness that the battlefield would never allow. Civilian sandals weren't just meant to endure, they were meant to impress. She hands you a bundle of narrow straps dyed in shades you didn't even realize Roman craftsmen could produce. Warm terracotta reds, deep olive greens, rich walnuts, sandy golds. Each strip is soft, pliable, almost luxurious. You catch yourself smiling. The Kaliga straps had grit. These straps have personality. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. Romans used a variety of natural dyes for leather, often derived from plants, minerals, and even insects. Brown and tan were common, but red, yellow, and black were popular among wealthier citizens. Sandals didn't just protect the feet, they signaled taste, class, and sometimes political affiliation. In Rome, even toes had opinions. You sort through the straps, feeling out their flexibility. The head craftswoman taps one, that one, flexible enough for the instep, and elegant. Her tone makes clear that elegance is mandatory, not optional. She rolls out a pattern for a classic Roman sandal-thin straps that weave in a delicate crisscross over the top of the foot, looping behind the heel and fastening with a small buckle. The layout is balanced, harmonious, almost rhythmic, like a piece of music translated into leather. She shows you where the straps must anchor, how they should curve, how they must flatter the foot rather than simply hold it. "A sandal that works," she says, "is useful. A sandal that works and looks good, that is Roman." You begin placing the first strap, adjusting the angle, letting the leather fall naturally. The strap feels alive, willing to bend but only on its terms. You secure the first end beneath the sole, punching a clean slit and threading it through. The motion is familiar now. Your hands have learned the language of leather. Then comes the first curve across the top of the foot. You hold the strap in place, adjusting the tension until it sits perfectly, neither too tight nor too loose. The craftswoman nods once, which, in this corner of the workshop, is equivalent to a standing ovation. A fringe tidbit floats into your mind. Some wealthy Romans commissioned sandals with soles engraved to leave patterned footprints. Messages like "follow me," "good fortune," or even playful insults meant for rivals. While no one in the workshop confirms this, one apprentice quietly scratches something into a scrap sole and snickers. You decide not to ask. You anchor the second strap, weaving it through a tiny leather loop so it crosses over the first. The two lines form a graceful X. You pause, admiring the symmetry. This sandal will not march into war, but it will stroll through markets, attend dinners, wander gardens, and whisper status with every step. The craftswoman gestures for you to continue. You add the heel strap, smoothing it into a gentle arc. Then the ankle strap, thin yet strong, ready to wrap around the wearer with a soft embrace rather than the iron grip of a soldier's lace. You secure the small bronze buckle, this one polished to a warm shine. It glints softly, like a tiny sun tucked beside the ankle. Historians still argue whether everyday Romans preferred simplicity or flair in their footwear. Mosaics and sculptures show both: minimal sandals with basic straps, and ornate designs with complex weaves and metal accents. But standing here, crafting a sandal with deliberate beauty, you understand something. The choice wasn't about fashion alone, it was about identity. Your strap arrangement begins taking its final shape, sleek lines following the contours of the imaginary foot resting within your creation. You lift it gently. It feels light, balanced, elegant. You imagine how it will look walking across sunlit marble, casting slender, graceful shadows. The craftswoman steps closer, inspecting your work with the intensity of someone judging a wine, a poem, or an apology from a husband who knows he's wrong. She runs her fingers along the strap curves, checking each attachment point, testing the flexibility. Then she nods. A real nod. Not the sharp, minimal tilt from before, but a full acknowledgement, a rare approval earned by few. You understand, she says simply. You exhale, realizing you are holding your breath. She gestures toward the display rack, where finished civilian sandals are arranged, like a gallery of Roman taste. Some delicate, some bold, some practical, some undeniably dramatic. You place yours among them. For a moment, you stare at the row, your sandal blending in yet subtly distinct, a quiet harmony in a chorus of stylish voices. These aren't battle companions. They're expressions of self, and yet, the craft, the precision, the intention, the devotion is the same. Whether for soldier or citizen, every sandal carries the same heartbeat of the workshop. As you step back, the craftswoman speaks again. Now, she says gently, you learn how color, scent, and finish give life to the leather. You turn toward the table where dyes and oils shimmer like alchemist tools, ready to transform your creation from well-made into unforgettable. The next lesson awaits, one of color, gloss, and the quiet rituals that make leather sing. You follow the craftswoman toward a long table, lined with small clay pots, bundles of herbs, shallow bowls of oil, brushes with bristles dyed from past use, and strips of leather drying in warm light. Compared to the heavy thud of hobnails and the sharp clink of bronze buckles, this corner of the workshop feels almost like a perfumery, calm, intentional, filled with quiet color. The craftswoman gestures for you to sit. A sandal is not finished, she says, until it reflects the person who will wear it. She lifts a small pot, swirls it gently, and reveals a deep, reddish-brown dye that glows like polished chestnut. Color, she murmurs, is memory. You lean in, breathing deeply. The scent is earthy, slightly sweet, touched with something sharp, oak bark, maybe, or powdered madder root. A mainstream historical fact rises in your mind. Romans dyed leather using a wide array of natural substances: madder for red, saffron for yellow, oak galls for dark browns, vine black for deep charcoal tones. Some artisans guarded their dye formulas like treasure, passing them down only to apprentices they trusted. The craftswoman dips a brush into the dye, then spreads it across a spare strap in a long, elegant stroke. The leather drinks it in instantly, darkening with a richness that transforms it from material into artwork. She hands you another brush, smaller, slender, clearly meant for careful work. She gestures to your civilian sandal. Choose. The colors before you range from warm ambers to soft olives, deep umbers, smoky blacks, and reds that look like they were harvested from sunset itself. You hesitate, then select a warm brown with hints of gold, something earthy, simple, but distinctly alive. You dip your brush lightly, feeling the weight of the dye on the bristles, then slowly draw it across the strap. The sensation is unexpectedly soothing. The dye glides, the leather responds, and a glossy sheen follows your movement, like a shadow learning to move in real time. You adjust the pressure, experimenting, watching the color deepen or lighten depending on how you tilt the brush. The craftswoman nods. Good, not heavy-handed. Leather remembers. A fringed tidbit surfaces. Some Roman cobblers scented their dyes and oils with herbs not for luxury, but to mask the tannery smell. Lavender, rosemary, and bay leaves were common favorites. You wonder how many sandals in ancient streets carried faint herbal auras, trailing whispers of gardens behind each footstep. Next, she brings you a small bowl filled with oil thick, golden, gleaming like liquid sunlight. For softness, she explains, dipping her fingers and rubbing the oil between her palms. If leather dries, it cracks. If it cracks, a sandal dies. You tilt your head. And the scent? She smirks. That is simply pleasant. She guides your hands as you scoop a bit of oil, spreading it across the sandal's straps. The leather responds instantly, darkening slightly, turning supple under your touch. It's like watching a tired face relax into a smile. The sandal begins to glow with a gentle, luxurious warmth. The smell rises sweet, resinous, carried by hints of rosemary and maybe citrus. You inhale slowly, letting it blend with the workshop air. Your fingers glide across the straps, smoothing them down, coaxing out their natural curves. Every movement feels like a quiet blessing. The soul receives its own treatment. The craftswoman gives you a rounded cloth, soft and worn, smooth from years of polishing. You dip it in oil, then rub the edges of the sole in small, firm circles. Under the cloth, the leather grows darker, richer, more defined. The subtle grain emerges, like the natural fingerprint of the material. Historians still argue whether Roman sandals were routinely polished or left raw. Some surviving examples show signs of oiling, others appear untreated. But standing here, polishing the edges until they shine faintly, you understand something. Artisans took pride in their work. Beauty wasn't an accident, it was intent. While the oil settles, the craftswoman pulls out a small wooden box. Inside are decorative finishes, thin strips of embossed leather, tiny stamped medallions, colored threads. Nothing gaudy, nothing overwhelming. Just small touches meant to elevate the sandal from simple to memorable. She hands you a narrow, embossed strip, a pattern of repeating wave-like lines. "Add this," she says. A customer asked for a hint of the sea, whatever that means. You laugh softly and glue the strip along the top strap, pressing it gently into place. The detail is subtle, catching the light only when the sandal moves. It feels like a secret flourish, one only the wearer will know to look for. Next, she shows you how to buff the sandal. Not the heavy scrubbing used for soldier footwear, but a gentler, rhythmic polishing that warms the leather's surface until it gleams faintly under workshop light. You move the cloth slowly, listening to the faint whisper of fabric against leather, feeling the sandal soften under your hands. For a moment, the world narrows to just the rhythm. Polish, breathe, polish, breathe. The craftswoman watches with approval. Leather responds to calm hands, she murmurs. Agitated hands. The finish becomes uneven. She gives you a side glance. Your hands are steady today. You smile a little. She's right. Without realizing it, the workshop has taught your body its own tempo, slowing your breathing, steadying your motions, teaching you to move with, not against, the material. You finish the final polish and lift the sandal into the light. It shines softly, not arrogantly. The dyed straps are warm and vibrant. The embossed detail adds quiet charm. The oil has given the leather a suppleness that practically invites touch. It looks, if you're honest, like something someone would be proud to wear. The craftswoman takes the sandal from your hands and examines it with her critical, surgical gaze. After a moment, she nods. "Good," she says. "It has soul." A long breath slips out of you, warm and relieved. She gestures to the racks. "Place it there. It belongs." You hang the sandal beside its companions. Together, they make a tapestry of Roman life colors, styles, scents, tiny expressions of personality, stitched and polished into form. As you step back, you notice your hands still smell of rosemary oil and madder dye, earthy, warm, ancient, and for a moment, you feel like a true artisan. But the day is not done. The workshop door opens, and the distant roar of the marketplace rushes in like a challenge. It's time to test your work, where sandals either shine or fail spectacularly. The forum awaits. The moment you step out of the calm, fragrant sanctuary of the workshop and into the bustling Roman forum, the world hits you like a chariot in full sprint. Noise rises from every direction, vendors haggling, children darting between stalls, donkeys expressing strong personal opinions, merchants shouting about figs so fresh they still remember sunlight. The air smells like a chaotic stew of spices, bread, warm stone, olive oil, and humanity. Lots of humanity. You clutch your freshly made sandals under one arm, trying not to look like someone who has absolutely no idea how to sell anything. The marketplace doesn't wait for you to adjust. It swirls and pulls you into its rhythm immediately. People sweep past you in a stream of fabrics, baskets, shouts, clattering pottery. Somewhere off to your right, A baker slams bread onto a table with a confidence you envy. A goat attempts to eat a senator's cloak. A senator attempts to pretend he is not losing a battle to a goat. This place alive, unpredictable, overwhelming, is the true test of your craftsmanship. A merchant waves you over, eyeing the sandals curiously. New work? He asks, squinting at your soldier's caligae. Heavy, durable, not bad. He picks it up, turns it over, and knocks on the hobnailed sole like he's checking whether a melon is ripe. The metal rings pleasingly against his knuckles. He grunts approval. Then he gestures toward your civilian sandal. And that one? You pass it to him. He inhales the scent, feels the flex of the leather, bends the straps gently. He runs a thumb across your embossed wave pattern. He murmurs. Pretty, subtle. He leans closer. People like subtle. You nod proudly. Then he adds, sometimes, which is less encouraging, but still mostly a compliment. A mainstream historical fact rises in your mind. The Roman Forum wasn't just a market, it was an ecosystem. Commerce, politics, gossip, religion, and social signaling, all tangled together. Footwear wasn't merely functional, it was part of a person's public identity. A clean, well-made pair of sandals could say as much about someone as their clothes, their jewelry, or the way they greeted a neighbor. Your sandals carry stories. Whether the crowd sees that, well, that's the experiment. A young woman approaches, drawn by the gleam of polished leather. She picks up the civilian sandal and turns it over carefully. Soft, she notes. She tests the buckle. Flexible. She taps the sole. Quiet. She gives you a nod. I like quiet shoes. My brother stomps everywhere. She glances down at her own worn sandals, then at yours again, perhaps. Before you can respond, a large man, with the shoulders of someone who could carry an ox and its opinions, steps forward. He picks up the caliga and smacks it against his palm. Strong, he says, good for marching. Then, narrowing his eyes, did you make this? Your stomach drops slightly. You nod. He grins. Good. My old pair failed after 20 miles. He pauses. Rock slide. He says it casually, as if rock slide is a normal thing footwear should endure. You manage a polite smile. Inside, you whisper to the sandal, good luck, brave soldier. Customers drift by in waves. Some admire your work. Some ignore it entirely. Some pick up the sandals, sniff them for reasons you cannot possibly understand, and then wander off without explanation. The Forum is nothing, if not humbling. A fringe tidbit enters your mind at an inconvenient moment. Ancient Romans sometimes judged shoemakers harshly if sandals squeaked, creaked, or left scuff marks on marble floors. Such flaws were considered signs of cheap or careless craftsmanship. You suddenly become hyper-aware of every sound your sandals might be making. You set them gently onto a flat stone surface and test them yourself. The caliga, solid, powerful, satisfying thud. The civilian sandal, soft step, barely a whisper. Good, no squeaks. Crisis avoided. A group of teenagers wander over next, loud, curious, wearing mismatched tunics like they dressed in a hurry while wrestling each other. One of them picks up your sandal and tilts his head. This looks expensive, he announces. Because it is, says another. Because it should be, says a third. Because it's nicer than your face, says the fourth, earning a shove. They admire the sandal genuinely before trotting off to bother a jewelry vendor. You release a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Teenagers are terrifying in any century. An older woman approaches next, her expression sharp enough to slice leather without tools. She lifts your sandal, inspects every seam, every stitch, every angle. Her eyebrows pinch. You brace yourself. Then she nods. Once, slowly, as if granting a divine blessing. This, she says, is made with care. It is the greatest compliment you have received all day. Nearby, a potter accidentally shatters a jar, and everyone immediately pretends not to see it. A fishmonger shouts about freshness. A political orator begins loudly criticizing something no one can quite hear over the sound of pigeons having opinions. The marketplace is a living theater, and your sandals are suddenly actors in the center of it. Historians still argue whether artisans personally sold their goods or relied on merchants. Some evidence suggests both occurred, depending on skill, fame, and demand. But today, you are very much the artisan responsible for showing your work to the world, and the world is responding with curiosity. A final customer approaches, a quiet man, with kind eyes and well-worn clothes. He picks up the civilian sandal, brushing his thumb across the dyed strap. "My wife," he says softly. "She walks every morning. Her sandals hurt her feet." He tests the flexibility. This would be gentle. He smiles faintly, the sort of smile that lives in the corners of the mouth, not the center. He pays full price without haggling, which is such a rare event the potter across the aisle actually gasps. You wrap the sandal carefully. He holds it with reverence, as though it is more than leather and dye and stitching, as though it is comfort, and maybe that's exactly what it is. The sun dips lower, painting the forum in warm amber. You gather your remaining sandals, pride settling into your shoulders like a well-fitted cloak. Your work has been tested, observed, judged, appreciated. Some sandals sold, some didn't. Some caught silent admiration. Some got elbowed by donkeys. But every pair stood under the honest eye of the marketplace and held their own. Now, as you turn back toward the workshop, a new challenge awaits. Crafting sandals tailored to singular, demanding clients whose feet and personalities are often more complicated than any strap or sole. You return from the chaotic swirl of the forum with a mixture of pride, relief, and the faint scent of fish that somehow always clings to anyone who spends more than 10 minutes near a Roman marketplace. The workshop embraces you with its familiar warmth and steady rhythm. But before you can even set down the remaining sandals, the master leatherworker clears his throat in a way that suggests ominous opportunity. He gestures toward a small alcove where a line of customers sits or lounges, or pouts with the self-importance of people who believe the world should shape itself around their feet. "Custom orders," he says, sighing, as though he's about to send you into battle. The true test of patience and diplomacy, and whether you can keep a straight face. You swallow. "Great." The first customer steps forward, a dignified-looking woman wrapped in fine fabric, posture straight enough to shame an entire legion. "My sandals," she begins, "must match the color of my late husband's favorite amphora." She pauses dramatically. "And they must not squeak." You nod solemnly, though your brain scrambles to recall whether you've ever seen an amphora that looks remotely wearable. You examine her feet, graceful, but one ankle leans slightly inward. You kneel and measure, noting the angle. "We can adjust for that," you say. She smiles, relieved. It's a small moment of trust. You sketch a design. She approves. The master leatherworker gives you a subtle nod. One customer down. A mainstream historical fact flickers through your mind. In ancient Rome, shoemakers often created bespoke footwear for clients with specific social or physical needs. Athletes, politicians, elderly patrons, even performers. Foot alignment, gait, and lifestyle all influenced design. Footwear was deeply personal. Next up, a merchant with a swagger so pronounced it might require its own pair of sandals. "I walk long distances," he declares, "but I want to look wealthy doing it." He wiggles his toes dramatically. "Also, I have wide feet." He's not exaggerating. You measure, adjust your straps, widen the sole template, and choose a supportive weave pattern. "Strong, but elegant, you promise." He beams. "Yes, that is also how I describe myself." His wife, standing behind him, rolls her eyes so hard you worry she may injure something. Then comes a small, solemn-faced boy. He lifts his foot timidly to show a scar running along the arch. "My shoes hurt," he murmurs. His mother places her hand gently on his shoulder. You crouch, examining the foot with careful eyes. The scar creates a pronounced sensitivity. You choose softer leather, a padded inner layer, and straps positioned to avoid pressure points. "These won't hurt you," you say. The boy brightens, his shoulders unfolding slightly. The workshop seems to soften around him. Even the Caliga master pretends not to be emotional. A fringe tidbit emerges from memory. Some Roman children wore protective amulets tied to their sandals, believed to ward off misfortune or illness. Seeing the boy's tentative smile, you understand why such traditions existed. The next customer nearly derails your composure. A nobleman enters wearing a toga so aggressively white it could blind the sun. He gestures to his feet with a flourish. "I require sandals," he announces, "that make my calves look magnificent." You glance at his legs. They are normal. "Of course," you say, keeping your face polite. You sketch a sandal with straps that rise higher up the leg, wrapping in a crisscross design that adds visual shape. "This will enhance the line of the calf," you explain. He gasps, delighted. "Marvelous. My political rivals will tremble." You doubt that. But customer satisfaction is customer satisfaction. The alcove empties slowly as you work through each client, balancing practical needs with personal quirks. Some want sandals silent as whispering gods. Some want sandals that announce them like fanfare. One woman insists her sandals must allow her to run gracefully in case gossip arises. Another claims her previous shoemaker betrayed her arches. The workshop buzzes around you, cutting, stitching, laughter, the occasional yelp when an apprentice pokes themselves with an awl. But at your bench, each custom design feels like a conversation between leather and personality. You begin crafting the first pair, the amphora-colored sandals. You mix dyes to achieve the exact reddish tone the client described. It takes several tries and turns your fingers a shade that suggests you've committed tomato-based crimes, but you get it right. The straps gleam with subtle elegance. Next, you widen the merchant's soles, reinforcing them with extra inner layering. The straps are firm but polished, suggesting wealth without burden. You include a supportive heel cup to reduce strain. When you test the flexibility, it bends without creaking success. For the boys' sandals, you take your time. Soft leather, gentle curves, no sharp edges. When you finish, you run your thumb along the inner lining. It feels like a quiet promise. No pain here. You add a tiny knot inside the sole, not functional, just symbolic, a hidden charm of comfort. Historians still argue whether such compassionate craftsmanship was common or romanticized. But sitting here, crafting for a real child whose eyes you remember vividly, you know kindness was always part of the trade. Finally, the nobleman's sandals. You design an elegant lattice of straps that wrap his calves in flattering geometry. You try not to think about how many political aspirations now hinge on your leatherwork. Throughout the day, the workshop shifts around you. The smell of dye rises. The hammering of hobnails echoes. The caliga master shouts at an apprentice for something the apprentice may or may not have done. The craftswoman from the dye table murmurs approval as she passes your bench. The workshop is alive, messy, skilled, loud, human, and somehow, you're at the heart of it. You complete the final touches and step back. 4 custom pairs sit before you, each one different, each shaped by a unique story. They are not just sandals, they are solutions, comforts, ambitions, hopes. When the customers return, their reactions paint the room in soft satisfaction. The dignified widow lifts her amphora-colored sandals and whispers, "Beautiful." The merchant stomps proudly. Silent. My rivals will hear nothing. The boy tries his on, takes 2 cautious steps, and then beams. It doesn't hurt. And the nobleman poses with his new calf-enhancing footwear, like a statue in training. For all the complexity, the compromises, the odd requests, this is why custom work matters, not for praise, not for payment, but because every foot carries a life, and every life deserves a sandal that understands it. As you gather your tools, the workshop master approaches with a small smile hidden beneath his beard. "You've learned," he says quietly. You nod, tired, proud, aching, fulfilled. But the day isn't done. Across the room, a lantern glints over a shelf of strange artifacts, charms, symbols, odd pieces of lore. Because sandals, it turns out, walk not only across roads, but across myths. You barely have time to stretch your fingers before the workshop master gestures you toward a dimmer corner of the room, a space noticeably quieter, filled with shelves of curious objects that seem to belong more in a storyteller's chest than in a sandal maker's workshop. Tiny amulets shaped like hands or eyes, scraps of inscribed leather, bronze tokens with unfamiliar symbols, knotted cords tied so intricately they look like puzzles waiting to be solved. This, the master says, is where craft meets superstition. He lowers his voice. Or, depending on who you ask, where craft meets truth. You step closer, drawn by the odd, enchanting energy of the place. Unlike the orderly benches where straps and soles behave predictably, this corner hums with secrets, half-believed rituals, and stories that feel older than the empire itself. The master hands you a strip of leather, stamped with a tiny symbol, an abstract swirl, almost like a wave bending into itself. This, he says, is a charm for safe travel. Some customers insist. He shrugs. Who are we to argue? A mainstream historical fact floats through your thoughts. Romans were notoriously superstitious. Footwear was no exception. Archaeologists have discovered sandals with protective symbols carved into the soles, amulets sewn under straps, even tiny lead tablets tucked into heel layers, charms against illness, curses against enemies, prayers for safe journeys. Shoes weren't just shoes, they were talismans. The master shows you a small bronze coin stamped with a horseshoe shape. Lucky left shoe charm, he explains. Some people believe the left foot protects the heart, so the left sandal must carry blessings. He lowers his voice conspiratorially. And some believe the right sandal brings fortune. Scholars disagree. Customers always disagree. He places a basket in front of you filled with scraps of dyed leather, bronze tokens, tiny pouches of herbs. Today, he says, you learn the myths. You pull out a small leather knot shaped like a looping figure eight. The master raises an eyebrow. Ah, the eternal step charm, worn by messengers who fear exhaustion. He taps the knot, supposed to keep their strides strong. He huffs. Did it work? Well, messengers ran fast anyway. A fringe tidbit rises. In some rural regions, people believed a sandal with mismatched straps could trick malevolent spirits into losing track of the wearer's step pattern. Whether this superstition existed to protect the wearer or to excuse sloppy craftsmanship, historians still argue. You explore deeper into the shelf. A string of tiny bells, a leather scrap dyed midnight blue, a bronze eye-shaped amulet, a strip of linen with faded writing. The master picks up the bells. For children, he says, not to sound pretty though they do, but to scare away evil spirits who dislike noise. He flicks one. It jingles softly, like laughter wrapped in metal. He lifts the blue-dyed leather, used in sandals for mourners, a mark of grief, but also protection. He gently sets it aside. Then, the strange eye amulet. Ah, he murmurs, the anti-envy charm, worn by people who fear jealousy, sometimes placed under the heel. He gives you a look. Imagine stepping on envy all day. Very Roman. Finally, the linen strip. The writing is nearly invisible. Prayers, he says, sometimes stitched into the sole. A secret conversation between the wearer and the divine. You run your fingers across the artifacts, feeling a quiet hum beneath them. Not magic necessarily, but meaning. The meaning people assign to the things they carry. The rituals that help them feel safe in an unpredictable world. The master hands you a plain sandal sole. Add a charm, he says. Something small, something subtle, something someone might believe in. You consider the basket thoughtfully. The bells are too loud. The blue scrap is too solemn. The envy amulet is too dramatic. But the eternal step knot, it feels right. Hopeful, quiet, useful. You tuck the knot beneath the sandal's heel strap, attaching it with careful stitching so it stays hidden but secure. The master inspects your placement. He nods slowly. Good. A charm must not disrupt the sandal, or the foot, or the day. He sets the sandal aside with approval. The workshop grows lively again as a few workers approach, each bringing their own stories of sandal folklore. One apprentice claims he once made a sandal for a man who insisted the left strap be slightly longer so Fortuna knows I favor her. Another swears by placing a pinch of sand in the sole for travelers crossing deserts. It tells the land you come in peace. Another laughs and adds that her grandmother believed stepping into sandals with the right foot first invited good news. Left foot first, she whispers. Arguments. You glance at your own feet, trying to recall which foot you put your sandals on with this morning. No memory surfaces, which, if anything, seems ominous. The master claps your shoulder. People carry stories in their steps, he says. Our job is to respect them. Historians still argue whether these beliefs shaped sandal-making or were merely charming extras. But watching the artisans speak, you realize something. Myth and craft were never separate here. They braided together like leather straps, each strengthening the other. The afternoon light softens through the workshop windows, casting warm gold across the charm corner. Dust motes drift like tiny, lazy spirits. You breathe in the scent of leather, oil, herbs, and bronze, a mixture that now feels familiar, comforting, ancient. A customer enters quietly, an older man with kind eyes and sandals so worn they're practically memories. He hands you a coin-shaped charm and says softly, "My wife believed this kept her steady. Could you place it in my sandal? Just here." He gestures to the inner arch. You nod gently. No theatrics, no speeches, just care. You sew the charm in place. He bows his head in thanks, and in that fragile moment, surrounded by myths and leather and stories stitched into straps, you understand the true heart of this craft. Sandals don't just carry people, they carry hopes, fears, prayers, memories. They carry the invisible things that walk beside us. When you return the man's sandal and he slips it on, he smiles not at you, not at the charm, but at something only he feels. And he walks out steadier than he walked in. You stand quietly for a long moment, the workshop calm around you. Then the Kaliga master calls your name with unnecessary volume. "Repairs," he barks. "Travel-worn, filthy, bring a strong stomach." Ah yes, another kind of story awaits one, shaped by miles and dirt, and the stubborn survival of Roman roads. The Kaliga master's shout ricochets off the workshop walls like a thrown hammer, and before you even reach his bench, the smell reaches you first. Not terrible, not dangerous, just seasoned, very seasoned. The scent of long roads, sweaty marches, roadside inns, questionable puddles, and enough dust to fill a modest amphitheater. On the bench sits a pair of sandals so worn they look like they've personally witnessed every major event in Roman history. Their straps are frayed, their soles are chewed by terrain, their hobnails, a heroic minority remains, but most appear to have flung themselves into oblivion long ago. Beside them stands their owner, a merchant whose cloak is coated in enough road dust to qualify as a second garment. He smiles sheepishly. "Long journey," he explains. "Longer than expected." He taps the sad, sagging sandal nearest you. "Could you restore them? They were good to me." You nod. The Kaliga master nods. Even the sandals, if they could, would nod. Repairs begin. You lift one sandal. The sole flexes in ways soles should not flex. The strap flops sideways like a tired fish. You place it on the table with the kind of gentleness usually reserved for elderly pets and unlucky pastries. A mainstream historical fact stirs at the back of your mind. Roman travelers relied heavily on cobblers because sandals took constant abuse from stone roads, mud, heat, and endless marching. Excavations show layers of repairs, extra patches, added soles, replaced straps, proving that a good sandal wasn't thrown away. It was revived, again and again, until it simply refused to hold one more stitch. You start by removing the remaining hobnails. A few cling stubbornly to the leather, as if offended by the idea of retirement. One snaps in half and pings dramatically across the workshop, narrowly missing an apprentice, who does not, amazingly, swear. Progress. Next, the sole. It's worn thin in the center, thick on the edges, distorted where the merchant overpronates. You cut away weak sections, trim the edges, and prepare a fresh layer of leather, a supportive cradle for the tired base. You glue, press, hammer, smoothing the new sole until it melds with the old like a patch of warm memory. Then, the straps. The top strap is split down the middle, a tragic sight. You reinforce it with a new piece stitched underneath, matching the original color as closely as possible, though the original color is now road-colored. The side strap, frayed from rubbing against a pack, requires delicate trimming and a new anchor hole. The heel strap, you blink, has been tied in a knot at some point, likely during a desperate roadside repair. You untie it. It sighs in gratitude. While you work, the merchant chats about his travels. He crossed dusty roads where the heat shimmered like invisible fire. He bartered in seaside towns where gulls screamed just to scream. He trekked through forests where his sandals collected enough mud to qualify as a geological exhibit. And through all of it, he says proudly, these sandals remained faithful. You pat the sandal gently. They're very brave. He nods gravely. Braver than I. As you stitch a new reinforcing line along the inner arch, a fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some ancient travelers believed that sandals accumulated the memory of every road walked, gaining protective energy along the way. Others joked that sandals absorbed too much bad luck, stones, unidentifiable debris, and needed charm-cleansing rituals. Strangely, after seeing what's inside these soles, the latter sounds extremely plausible. The Caliga master inspects your progress, grunting approval, high praise from a man whose emotional range includes grunt and slightly different grunt. He hands you fresh hobnails. Put them strong, he says. Merchant walks like an ox. The merchant bows. True. You lay out the hobnails in tight formation, hammering them into the renewed sole. The ringing sound is satisfying, metal biting into leather with purpose. Each nail anchors new life into the sandal, preparing it for miles yet to come. When both soles are reinforced, stitched, nailed, and polished, you move on to conditioning. A mixture of oils and soft wax brings warmth back into the leather, restoring flexibility and color like water returning to a thirsty plant. The straps gleam faintly, the edges smooth. The sandal looks, well, not new, but deeply alive again. Historians still argue whether Roman shoemakers aimed to preserve the original appearance during repairs or simply restored functionality. But as you work, you understand the truth. Repairs were an act of respect. A sandal that survived deserved to keep walking. The merchant returns from sipping barley tea at the dye table. He lifts one sandal hesitantly, as if afraid it will crumble. Then he slides his foot in. His eyes widen. He stands. He walks 2 steps. He walks 3. He jogs in place. He beams. It's better than before, he says, laughing. You've given them a second youth. You blush slightly. Or maybe your face is just warm from all the hammering. He pays generously more than expected and adds a small tip in the form of dried figs. For energy, he says conspiratorially. You'll need it. He's probably right. After he leaves, a messenger bursts through the door, panting, holding sandals that appear to have lost an argument with speed itself. The straps are frayed, the soles cracked, the heel support ripped entirely free. He tries to speak but only manages. Long, road, rocks, angry dog. You nod sympathetically and take the sandals. The repairs begin again, but this time, you feel steady, confident, ready, because now you understand. Repairing sandals is storytelling in reverse. You read the journey, stitch by stitch, and then help the story continue. Hours pass, filled with the rhythm of restoration. Leather flexes under your fingers, threads tighten with purpose, hobnails bite into renewed soles. Piece by piece, the worn sandals regain strength, and as the workshop quiets with late afternoon light pouring in through the high windows, a gentle calm settles over your bench. The day has been long, your hands ache, but your heart hums with the quiet pride of someone who has not just crafted, but revived. The master approaches quietly. You've learned repairs, he says. Now, you will learn something greater. He gestures toward the center of the workshop, where tools lie still, and the evening light softens the air. Reflection, legacy, the final lesson is waiting, and it's not about leather at all. The workshop settles into its evening hush, that soft and sacred quiet that only arrives when the tools have stopped ringing, the apprentices have stopped bickering, and the masters have slipped into that thoughtful silence earned through an honest day's work. Lamps glow along the walls, casting warm arcs of amber light that stretch across benches, shelves, scraps of leather, and half-finished sandals waiting patiently for tomorrow. You stand in the center of it all, the air still touched with scents that now feel like home: oiled leather, warm dye, cooling metal, a faint trace of rosemary. The master gestures for you to sit beside him on a low wooden stool that has definitely seen more stories than it has splinters. This, he says, his voice low and even, is the hour when a cobbler understands what their hands have done. You look down at your fingers, thread-stained, oil-scented, sore in places you didn't know humans could be sore. They rest in your lap with quiet dignity, finally still. Around you are the artifacts of your day. The elegant civilian sandal with its soft sheen, the fierce caliga with hobnails ready for a legion's march, the custom sandals, tailored to the quirks, hopes, and worries of real people, the restored travel-worn pair now ready for miles more, and the quiet charm knotted beneath a strap, carrying someone's belief. The master inhales, folds his arms, and studies you the same way he inspects leather, checking strength, flexibility, readiness. Craft, he says, is not just making, it is remembering. His eyes soften, and it is being remembered. A mainstream historical fact circles your thoughts. Roman cobblers' suttores were part of every city, every village, every market. Their work touched every level of society. Footwear wasn't a trivial craft. It shaped literally every step of Roman life. Soldiers marched on it. Merchants traded on it. Children learned on it. Senators schemed in it. Even gods in myth wore it. The master nods toward your completed pairs. A sandal leaves the hands, he says, but it does not leave the story. He rises and walks slowly between the benches, letting his fingers drift across the rows of finished footwear. Your stitching will see places you never will. Your soles will carry burdens you will never know. Your straps will witness lives unfolding. He glances back, and someone, somewhere, will be grateful for work they never saw you do. You stand and follow him through the workshop. He leads you to a dusty shelf holding sandals too old to wear, fragments, really, faded straps, cracked soles, hobnails rusted into place. You recognize them immediately as relics used for training, examples of how long a well-crafted sandal can live. These, the master says, belonged to cobblers long before me. His voice holds a distant fondness. They left no scrolls, no statues, no great inscriptions, but they left this. He lifts one cracked sole reverently, and because of it, I remember them. A fringed tidbit floats up. Archaeologists often find sandals in places where no grand histories were written, in ditches, wells, doorways, border forts, simple homes, the small remains of everyday lives that slipped through time, yet still speak softly of the people who made and used them. You realize suddenly and deeply that the sandals you've crafted today will someday outlive you, whether they survive decades or centuries, whether someone finds them or not. The truth remains. You shaped something that will walk beyond your lifetime. The master gestures for you to follow him once more. He takes you to the open doorway of the workshop, where the last traces of twilight gather in soft violet layers above the rooftops. A gentle breeze stirs the hanging sandals, making them sway slightly, like quiet breathing. Look, he says. People walk past the workshop on the road outside, some wearing sandals, not unlike the ones you've made. You notice how their straps curve around their feet, how the soles bend at each step, how they carry burdens, joy, exhaustion, anticipation. So many lives, so many roads, so many stories. You are part of them now, the master murmurs. You watch the passers-by with new eyes. You imagine where each sandal came from, whose hands stitched it, what stories it might have witnessed, and for the first time all day, you feel the full weight and the full wonder of being a sandal maker in ancient Rome. Historians still argue whether cobblers were artists, engineers, laborers, or priests of practicality. But standing here, in this fading light, you know the answer can be all of them. The master places a hand on your shoulder. Leave your tools, he says softly. A good cobbler knows when to stop. You nod. The workshop is dim now, peaceful in its winding down. You set your tools in their place, wipe your hands clean, and let the day exhale with you, because tomorrow, your craft will begin again. But tonight is for reflection, rest, and letting the legacy of the cobbler settle gently into your bones. Wind down. 300 words. The workshop grows quieter still, each lamp flickering with a warm, rhythmic pulse that smooths the edges of everything around you. The benches blur into soft silhouettes. The tools soften into gentle outlines. and the leather scraps resting in baskets seem to melt into shadows, as if the room itself has finally decided to curl inward and breathe. You feel that quiet, too. It settles over your shoulders like a shawl woven from calm. The air feels slower, the light feels warmer, and your steps, as you move across the room, grow long and unhurried. Each breath you take loosens the tightness in your fingers, unknots the strain in your shoulders, and lets the day ease its weight into the floorboards beneath you. The sandals resting along the shelves, civilian, soldier, custom, restored, seem to glow faintly in the dimness, as though they're dreaming their own tiny dreams. You recognize the stillness here, the gentle pause before night truly settles. It's the same stillness leather feels when softened by oil, the same stillness a freshly stitched strap holds before it shapes itself to a foot, the same stillness that comes when craft is done well and done with care. Let that stillness reach you. Let it soften your thoughts the way a cobbler softens stiff leather, patiently, slowly, kindly. Your breath drifts in and out, long and calm. The workshop fades a little more with each exhale. Lamps dim, shadows lengthen. The world outside narrows into a small, peaceful hum, and you feel it, that gentle assurance that everything you've shaped today will continue its journey without you for now. You can rest. You can unwind. You can let go. The roads will still be there in the morning,